we've been doing this for a long time. It's all about giving back. And Brian and I go back a long way. And he is a person that gives back to the community. He's been doing that for a long time, but he also gets people employed, right? So those are the kind of people you want to have good friendship with, right? Because you're going to need him. He's going to be there for you. And I have a lot of respect for him. So I'm so excited that he's going to present to us today. Please track us here at the South Florida Agile Association. We're here to help you. So I'm going to pass the baton on to you, Brian. You have your PowerPoint. I want to make sure you have everything you need.
Yeah, Brian.
I got it. Well, thank you, Rick. I appreciate it. And as Rick said, we've known each other for a while, and South Florida Agile Association, man, it has grown. And so I appreciate everyone here being a part of it. And this meeting here, of course, this meetup is a little different than what I remember, of course, going to previous South Florida Agile Associations, as we're going to touch on Agile, but from a different concept, from an interviewing concept, looking at how these things interact. So the presentation today will be a little bit more geared onto, in this way, how the candidate should consider things. But we're going to talk about the company side as well, because, of course, it takes two to tango. Sorry for the pun. So we want to talk about that and understand how that works together. So let's make it interactive, right? It's not just a one-sided presentation. If I know Rick would rather have you guys talk more than me. So I just want to start off, though, and just give you a little baseline of the thought process behind where we're going on the conversation today. So let me share my screen here. Is everyone able to see this?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. All right, great.
We got it.
So guys, interviewing, what do they really want to know, right? Well, that's always the question everyone asks. It's, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to say? What are they looking for? But of course, first, as Rick said, my name is Brian Nunez, partner and director of business development at Ranger Technical Resources. I have about 18 years focused in developing talent under multiple markets, actually starting in music to now in technology. And I've been doing that directly for about 11 years. And what I really try to do, just to share with you guys, is be able to coach and assist our partners to develop synergy between their business goals and their resource planning, and also how they look at their teams and how it works to their business initiatives. So that's kind of a little bit about me. And the last part of my commercial, and then it's done, it's Ranger Technical Resources. This is my information. If you have questions or anything, you can reach out to me anytime. But we've been open since 1996, and we specialize in IT professional services, consulting, and talent acquisition. So that's it. On to the good stuff. All right. Creating the baseline. How many times have you all been misunderstood? I'm sure it happened today, possibly. Just a question out there. Can anyone give an example to this? In one of their teams, a meeting, a stakeholder meeting, an interview, whatever, just anything.
So are you asking me when have I flipped my finger to my team? I'm sorry, I'm trying to interpret the question.
That's right. Because if you think about it, right? If you think about it, being misunderstood is so easy. I mean, that's why I love this photo, and I share this a lot to people I work with, because, you know, from one side of things, it looks pretty bad. From another side of things, it makes sense, right? And this is kind of what I want to dive into from a mindset here today, and what's going on in terms of perspective when you jump into an interview, right? And as you talk to stakeholders, you talk to your teams, you talk to finance, all these people talk in different languages, and it's important to understand where that's coming from. You know, I had a technology director that worked with me once that told me that, and I thought it was funny at the time, but told me that she's great at converting the Klingon, right? To take how many times do you take concepts, you clean them up, and then you present them back in a better way, right? So let's think about some of those things that are going on. And even if we think in our teams, all of you, of course, in South Florida Agile Association, you guys are trying to build high-performing, self-managed, all these things that are important to teams to be efficient. And it takes a long time. It takes a really long time to get this. And one of the biggest parts, of course, is that common language, which I point out here as that key, that trust, that vulnerability, the ability to understand what's going on, right? Even simply simple, which is not simple, but the definition of done, right? What does that mean to the next person, to the next person, to the next person? And until you really understand what it means, then you understand where that person is coming from. And it takes time to build that. Now, maybe you guys are thinking, how does this apply to an interview? Even more so, are we talking to professional interviews? All of you, I'm guessing, and let me know if I'm wrong here, but all of you are in the agile space of some sort, product owners, scrum masters, agile coaches. You know your expertise to no end. But can we tell each other from a perspective that we know how to interview or be able to talk to those things that we want to dig out from somebody? It's a very hard thing to do, especially, as we said earlier, when you're back and forth in between what your normal day is. And let's not forget that in these interviews, going back to the candidate side, the candidate themselves has an initiative, and they're trying to find out what's going on, what the environment is, what's best for them, what are those things. And we're putting all that together in a 30-minute window, right? If you look back at the team again, teams take forming, storming, and norming. Everyone's heard this, of course. Can you do this in a 30-minute window? Just putting it out there. If someone stormed with you on an interview, what do you guys say? What would happen? Exactly. Done. Right? So the question, of course, perspective, how do you answer questions? How do you gain the information? What are you looking for? This is what we're trying to figure out here. And a reason why we're saying it's important for the interviewee to think about these things is because it's a misconception sometimes, and I'll put it out there, that the company understands what they're doing at that time of the interview, especially with everything else going on. So that misconception leads me into, I just thought this was a funny photo. Right? Because, right, oftentimes you get on an interview call, the company thinks they're the big guy on campus, they're the big elephant in the room, they control the narrative. If I'm having a bad day, I show up to the interview and say, what's Kanban? And you expect the candidate to understand this and just respond easily while they have all their own questions, right? And so as a candidate, going back to the candidate side, as a candidate, remember these things because it's important to understand how to perceive it and how that perception turns into some of the answers you use, which is what I want to go over and talk about more. And we've all heard of some of these things. Does the person understand what I do? Right? Is it the company? Is this the best person we can find? Right? A candidate, what is it that you're looking for? I've heard that so many times. And I've heard from both parties even, do you understand Agile? I mean, I'm just, anyone else here, anything that's funny? I love these things. I think they're, maybe call me a nerd for interviewing here, but anyone else have any funny ones that they've heard before?
You guys can unmute yourself. Any funny during your interview?
I don't know about funny, but like I've been in interviews and it's hard to, you kind of have to, like if it's for Scrum Master, for an Agile coach or something like that, what I try to figure out is like how much do they know Agile? Are they coming from a waterfall perspective and trying to really understand that a little more so that I can help them or gear myself towards, you know, their questions and try to answer those so that they can have a better perspective of who I am.
It's a great point, Joe. It goes right along with what we're saying. So let's separate the two, right? Let's separate the two now. And this a little more interactive here, right? Guys, what do you want to know as an interviewee? What do you want to know as an interviewee? Let's break that down for a second. I have some random things here. Didn't complete this. You know, what does the company do? What is the company looking for me to do? What is the team interaction? That was a typo. How mature is the agile process? What other ones? Guys, tell me, what other things as an interviewee or the candidate are you looking for in your interview?
I frequently ask a question, which is like, what must happen in like the first 3 months or 6 months, so you could see my arrangement would be a success.
So that's a great one.
To see what are the expectations, or I just make it that remember the future question, which is, if we meet in six months and everything went well, what was right, and the other one around.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what kind of challenges they have. I'd like to see how vulnerable they are to share them.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I want to know what the pain points are.
I ask, did they ever have any dedicated Scrum Master or a product owner? If they work with Scrum Master, so if I'm applying for a Scrum Master role, I asked, did they work with one before, and what they liked, what they didn't like about them. Did they have a dedicated product owner? And I also ask, what is a one thing that is non-negotiable, one skill that is non-negotiable for this specific role?
I always like to talk about leadership and try to understand the leadership culture of the organization. I think that helps me kind of make decisions. Where they are and where they inspire to be.
Yeah. Now I'm just going to put it out there, and thank you guys for adding some of these, and they're great ones. They're great ones. I think the question we should have then is, how do we get those answers now? Right? Who's interviewing who? Going back to that picture, right? Of the candidate versus the company perspective. Those were great. So I took some notes and I want to come back to those, but let's do the other side. What are interviewees looking for? All right, I want you to take the cap off, now put on the cap, right? I put two things here. Tell me about your experiences. Tell me about your thoughts on Agile, but let's open it up again. As an interviewer, what are you looking for in a candidate?
Strengths and weaknesses.
Passion and dedication.
Their willingness to follow up and follow through. Always follow through. I think that's one of the biggest downfalls I see with many people, is that they fail to consistently follow through, and it's just like, it's such a pain point.
Very true.
How they're going to work with the team or leadership, they're going to interact and fit in with the culture.
Culture fit, that's what I wanted to add too.
Does the candidate have a basic knowledge of the Scrum process or Agile itself?
One is, how solution oriented or solution focused is the candidate. So can he just talk or actually get something solved?
To me, more like demonstrate it to me. So I actually want them to show me how they facilitate a meeting, because sometimes there's a lot of talk, but it doesn't really actually, it's not demonstratable for me.
Yeah, I agree. I would look for a candidate that just doesn't talk the talk. The person needs to be able to really execute, think out the box, and provide solutioning as well, and be articulate.
I think that was Catherine.
Yes.
That was awesome. And not to say everyone else wasn't.
Everybody else had a horrible idea.
I don't want to say that everyone else, I think it's spot on. Spot on.
Yeah, articulate it.
But exactly, right? You guys, if you think about these things, and let's kind of, right, if you think about these things, do these objectives match? what we just talked about, right? I'm just going to pick one out of the hat. The first one on the candidate side, we talked a lot about what is the company doing? What are the expectations? What challenges do you have? Do you have a dedicated Scrum Master? What is the one skill that you need for the position? Yet on the other side, you guys all talked about, which is perfectly great, and I would suggest is the most important thing, culture. How would that person fit into the culture? And then as we talked more, we started talking about a little bit more about, do you know Agile? And then we pointed out together that it's not necessarily maybe answering a question, but it's what's the context? So I just want to pause for a second and ask you guys, do you see objectives matching here? Or what else do you see that doesn't match?
So I'm just curious why she's making a fist.
Well, let's make a little story. I like it. Maybe she just talked to someone who video, like Rick said in the beginning, after getting out her meeting with her stakeholder that she had to ditch and the video didn't work. And she's like, no!
Brian, when you were saying this, it was really kind of clicking for me. Like, if I were to re-answer the question, I would actually look for more synergy. Like, this is what I can do, and this is why it would be benefit for you. And that way, it was more like a collaborative rather than the picture you put of somebody dominating or the other. What if interviewing was different? What if we're actually talking to each other like human beings and we're saying, guys, I can help you with this. Can you help me with this? This is really going to help us kind of like really move the needle. I don't know. I keep picturing that as you kept talking to that.
That's a great point. I think a lot of time that I spend, unfortunately, and I say that in all positivity, is on some of the things that we're discussing here, is because there is this misconception here, illustrated by this funny little cartoon, right? And based on what we just talked about, where the candidate, it's not a company market anymore, but companies aren't realizing that.
Wow.
Not only that, but the companies think the candidate should jump on and know exactly what's going on. But we just covered that there's about 1.2 billion questions that as a candidate you would want to know before you even join a company. Right? So that's why I want to make sure, I think preparation to interviews and knowing that these objectives don't match goes back to the perspective, making sure, okay, now that I know this, how am I going to get the, and is there a dedicated Scrum Master in the team? Because I'm sure, you know what, let's open that one up. If there's a dedicated Scrum Master in the team who does not have product owner responsibilities, what does that mean for you guys? What does that mean? What does that tell you?
Can you repeat that? It doesn't have what?
So if you're on an interview and you wanted to understand, is there a dedicated Scrum Master in the team? And somehow you get the answer, yes, there is. And you also find out that that Scrum Master does not have any other product owner responsibilities. They're solely a Scrum Master. What does that tell you about the environment?
It's a good thing.
That they are doing actual Scrum, most likely.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Actually, especially it tells nothing directly because you can do whatever it is. But as also interviewers do, you can find out more depths about the company because usually they will not say yes or no, but start to explain something. So it's an input question. You could ask another one like, how are you organizing product owners and Scrum Masters, which is more open question.
Yeah, I would try to understand that a little more. Are you, I would ask, are you looking for the Scrum Master and a product owner to be the same role, or are you looking for me to build a team and bring on a product owner to help manage the products?
Great things.
Brian, just
Go
to
ahead.
understand the question, you're asking if for some reason I'm interviewing and
Yeah.
suddenly they tell me this news.
Yeah.
Somebody who's worked in Agile for a long time, of course, that would sound like that's a good start. This is a good sign. I would get that feeling that this is a good sign. Let me keep diving deeper. Compared to if they tell me the opposite, this person's this role and this role, I'm saying, oh my goodness, I'm back to, I'm going to have to start from scratch to try to coach them. It sets my expectations of where I think I could fit in and help them out. So I would be evaluating those conversations to see how I can help and am I the right person to help, right? So I think I could go very deep, but I would love to hear more as I keep talking to that.
Yeah, and these are great points. And again, let's tie this back to the topic here of perspective and how to get into an interview in a short period of time and understand things, right? Because again, I want you guys to really think about this picture of the unbalanced area of interviewing. So we're not going to have, you're not going to have, or potentially not have the time in a first interview per se, maybe second and thirds, this will expand, but to be able to ask all these questions. So what can you properly assume through some of the questions that are being asked and respond back with in a way that makes the person feel as if you understand where they're coming from? Now, that is a very hard thing, but this is what I would like to, if anything, share with you guys here, which is, since we know that these objectives don't match, and since we know the interviewer is in an unbalanced position where they're looking to test you, unfortunately, sometimes in a conversational manner, sometimes in not, some of the questions could answer the questions that the candidate had that we talked about, such as what are the expectations in 6 months, right? If we start hearing about where the company is going, we can start picking things out to have better responses. I would like to relate that to potentially, and let you guys, and open this up again, when you're talking to your stakeholder, whoever that may be, and they have something that they need you to do. You guys are so good at what you do because you're hearing everything and you're finding all the holes. Now, you probably have questions that you send back, but there's things that as they're talking, you're also assuming as you go. You're critically thinking through the statements that you're receiving to then put together a picture. Now, I might be off base potentially, but tell me guys, have you also felt this in your stakeholder meetings, in your developer meetings, in your Scrum meetings, right? Have you felt this? So even though the presentation is geared, of course, towards candidate and interviewing, one of the things that I've always found very dear and something I always look into is the art of something Catherine said, the art of communication. How can you, and you talked about having a candidate be able to communicate clearly. How can you be able to communicate ideas in a way that doesn't pigeonhole you into someone thinking that you only know this and allow for a conversation?
I love that, Brian, because so sometimes I do this, especially when they tell me, did I talk enough? I'm always fearful, like, well, did I give you enough information, right? So I actually have a trick that I use that I'll say, look, I talk a lot. So please tell me when, I'm going to talk about the item. Tell me when you think I've gotten enough so that I could pull back. But because I end up talking the whole time and just give them that insight. So I do some of that to give that. But it's true. And then the second thing that I do for especially agile interviewing, sometimes they want to hear what the cookie cutter answer is. So I sometimes tell them, do you want to hear what Scrum Guy says? Or do you want to hear what I've experienced in the truth? Because sometimes they're looking for different things, and I want to make sure that I'm giving them, those different perspectives. Yes, I know what the book says, But I also know what I've experienced with doing this. So that helps me a little bit in adjusting the conversation.
Rick, thank you. I want to point out too, that's a great transition, a good method, because you say, you want to hear what Scrum Guy says or this? You know what you're doing there also, potentially, and think about it, and I'd like to hear from the rest of the team here, is you're also showing the type of culture you are as a person too, right? Like if you say, do you want Scrum Guy or do you want what I'm really doing, right? You're breaking the ice really quickly in a small conversation where the other person can either respect that, and then that is a good pair for you, or the other person might not respect it, and that gives you your answer right away that maybe it's not a good pair, right? So going out there to everyone else, are there other things that you guys have done to be able to decipher between how you should answer?
I think it really depends on the question being asked. I think you can assess the level of a detailed answer based on the question. And I like what Rick said about stating up front. I talk a lot, and kind of let me know when you've gotten the point, and I can stop.
For sure. Yeah, it's a nerve-wracking thing too, right? This stuff here, because it's putting you front and center. There's a bunch of emotions going on. So having that cognizant ability also, right? There's so many things happening at the same time. You're trying to figure out what the company's about. You're trying to answer correctly. You might be nervous. You're trying to pay attention to, am I talking forever? Am I answering the question or giving a story, right? So that's another good point, Michael.
So Brian, another thing is I kind of observe the interviewer and see if their stuff is very quick, then maybe I respond very quick, right? There's a whole science behind mimicking the people that you're talking to that sometimes plays a part. Sounds horrible, sounds like you're not genuine and you're not being who you are, but it is a more comfortable feeling, right? Because I can adapt to you and I can listen to you and help you in the way you hear things.
For sure. Let me give you a couple, and we've talked about some great things, but a couple key takeaways, right? That I think from this, I want us to start to talk about, and just open conversation. And can you guys can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just open conversation, but a couple key takeaways, right? And I'll go through them. First one, always answer questions with the role in mind. Right? Sometimes we get caught up on these things. If you get asked about Scrum, don't talk about Kanban, right? Right? Like think of again, the interviewer who's just getting out of a meeting, who's like, all right, my team doesn't know Scrum and I need someone to know Scrum. What's Scrum? And then you say, well, I like Scrum and Kanban, but Kanban is good because it has a backlog you could choose from, right? It's out. You clicked off because, right, it's a different subject. You can speak about the different forms, but make sure you answer the question within the right mind of the role. The second thing, ask for clarification. It's okay. It is. No one dings you over the thousands of interviews I've been on now. No one's going to ding you for asking a clarification question, right? Don't just assume you understand the question you're being asked. It's okay to a point of earlier when we talked about, and I keep going back to this, is there a dedicated Scrum Master in the team? Because you could be asked a question about how does your release trains work? And you could say real quick, can I ask you this? And what that does is a quick question. What that does is it lets them know, the other person know, that you are consciously thinking about how you're going to answer this and how this is included into that answer. So it's okay for asking for clarification. Another thing is always answer questions with your audience in mind. If you're talking to a director The director has a bunch of things on his plate, right? We all do. I know that's oversaid, but I think you guys know my point there. When they're asking you a question about Agile, they could be looking for the aspect of you being able to handle something, not the details. Maybe they want to know the details, maybe not. You can ask clarification about some of those things, but always remember, if you're talking to a team member, the team member might actually, going back to something you guys said, what's their pain points? The team member through a question might tell you what their pain points are. Right? So by understanding that pain point and listening to that question, you're actually responding to the person on the other side because they might have that question more so than someone else. We've talked about this a couple times too. Don't think the interviewer is well prepared. All right. We all want those companies that act well. We always want them to be formal. We want them to have that sense. But I think we all know the term, the grass isn't always greener. There are good companies out there. There's great ones out there. We all work for them now. There's other ones that we strive to go to. That's the recruiter in me. I didn't mean to say that, but I'm just saying we all strive to go to a company that we want to potentially. But that person's role isn't to be a professional interviewer. So make sure you know that and make sure you think about that so that when they ask a question and you get thrown off, don't take that to the company. Don't take that as a representative of the company aspect. So just something to think about. Another thing, again, Catherine hit it, qualified communicators get jobs over qualified candidates sometimes. So if you're great at what you do and you put together those aspects and you think about some of these things as answering the questions with the role in mind, ask for clarification, answer with the audience in mind. It's going to be an easy thing. I had a brain lapse there. And you're going to get that job 100%. And this last part, which we all kind of mentioned, Rick kind of spoke to, tell a story. We talk about stories in Agile. We talk about getting the story. Are there details? How does it fit to the business objective? What's the epic? Drill it down. Obtainable chunks. They want to hear obtainable chunks, right? Who, what, where, when, how, and why. Also, I like to talk about, I don't know if you guys heard about the STAR method. The STAR method is you get asked a question, you talk about what's the situation, small window. What's the task, small window. What's the action, small window. And what's the result, small window. If you had a question for someone and they responded to you with situation, task, action, result, would that hit the comment of, I want a solutions-oriented person?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, so let's open it up fully. Let's talk about it. Are there any questions? What are you thinking? Any takeaways here? Any questions about those key takeaways that we just discussed, please?
That point, that point really resonated with me about being able to communicate. You have the skills, you have the experience, but being able to communicate effectively and concisely to who you're interviewing with. I think that is so key. I think for me, out of all the slide that you just I think that's, to me, that resonates the most. The qualified communicators get jobs over qualified candidates.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, sometimes it blows my, I'll be transparent, just like you all. It blows my mind sometimes, right? Where you can have a person who's great at what they do and 18 companies say no to them. How is that possible? But we all sit there and we think, oh, that company doesn't know. That company doesn't know.
No,
I
it's
hate
not that.
exactly.
The company doesn't know.
I
They know.
Exactly. I hate to say this, but going back, right? Are you being misunderstood?
Right.
Do you have your speech together?
I think another little trick, and maybe it's part of communication, is if you can find out, obviously do your research before you do the interview, but you can find out who you're interviewing with and, kind of look them up on LinkedIn and get a little bit of perspective. If you do that, then you can kind of look for icebreakers or some way to build a rapport at the beginning of the interview and start it off right. I've done this trick and it's worked out for me.
And Brian, I want to add to what you just mentioned before. Sometimes just communication alone or just being articulate is not enough, because sometimes the person could be a great talker, but it's all fluff. You want someone that's able to provide a solutioning as well.
That's right.
Unless you're in sales.
Yes.
I will tell you, salespeople are the hardest to interview, I've found, at least in my opinion. Well, good salespeople, let me say that.
What do you mean by that, hardest to interview?
There's an art, I think that was Bikram. There's an art to be able to know just a little bit and make it sound like you're a thought leader. And in a sales role, if you're really good at what you do, I'm gonna have, and I'll just speak for me. Let's pretend I'm the salesperson. I'm gonna have a team. All you guys are my team that have given me, Rick, okay, fully. Rick has given me so much from South Florida Agile Association and knowledge over the years, even certified in Agile and everything else, that while I don't work as a Scrum Master or product owner every day, I can speak to it enough where an organization will open up its doors, and then I bring Rick behind me, or I bring Joe behind me, or I bring Ron behind me, or I bring John behind me, or I bring anyone behind me, and it's all done. So what I mean by this is, and to Catherine's right too, you can have great communication and know a little if the question is not asked the right way, and get the job and end up not being good for the role too. Right? So that goes into another area of how do you interview in a better way to collect the true nature of something. But I think that's what I was referring to in terms of it's hard to interview a good salesperson because they'll speak very well about these points.
Right. I do have a different question. I'm interested in the environment the company has for encouraging teamwork. So what is that balance between knowing how to encourage teamwork versus value for individual contributor? Because that emphasis makes building teamwork hard as a Scrum Master, but that can be a sensitive subject, I guess. And so how do you walk that line? Are you going into a place that, so with that question, it's what I want to ask, but am I doing myself a disservice by going there?
Good question. I'd like to send that out though first. I'd like to phone a friend and see, does anyone have a thought on this? Or have they been in this situation and have a solution here?
So just to reiterate the question is what? You're going in there and you're trying to find out whether they cherish collaboration over silo conversation or silo work.
Yeah, kind of. And if I'm looking for a Scrum Master position, the rules of the game matter. Are the people working to individual performance plans that really they're more loyal to than are there incentive structures for teamwork?
I like it. Anybody have an answer for that?
Okay, let's flip it. Let's flip it for a second, right? Like we did with interviewer and interviewee, right? All you guys from a company's perspective, how do you explain this to your development team? If Agile, like you said, if Agile says teamwork is big in terms of collaboration, that's high level, right? How are you dictating that to your team?
So that's how you would frame that.
Exactly. Because and it also shares with you the maturity level of where the organization is. There's a question underneath there, right? The sort of, again, the going back to what is the 6 months expectation? As an individual, do you want to be with the company? See, this goes into your mindset too. Do you want to be with a company that's already there? Or are you looking for a company that's going there? Right? So if you're looking for a question like that, you could turn that around and say, hey, I'm curious, how do you promote collaborations in your teams? Or do you find your team to be more collaborative, or is it more individual tasks or more single contributors that you get together, right? Instead of you having the question, if you pose it back to them and ask them their opinion on that, it doesn't come across like you have a thought, but rather you're curious on the interviewer's thought of that subject. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah.
I keep thinking of how do you incentivize the team, right? So it's the opposite of saying, if you show me examples of how you incentivize the team, that'll tell me that, okay, then they cherish group collaboration. If they can't answer that, then that's going to be an interesting conversation, right?
Well, that's the thing. And back to the other question that Brian put up, do you want to go into a place that's already doing agile, or the ones that are going? It's the ones that are going that want to hire the help, not so much the ones that are there. The ones that are there do a lot of grow their own, and maybe some bring along. So here you are going into this place and you want to be successful. And one of the things is, have they let go of so much emphasis on that performance plan and how traditional and all of that? And
where do they inspire to be? Like, if you're giving them the future go and you're saying, where do you guys want to be as an organization? What are some things that you think is going to be, a vision, right? So if they can picture that for you, that'll give you an idea like, okay, they're heading in the right direction that I want to be a part of. Or, wow, they actually don't have no idea. They're just doing this to get rid of people, and they think they're going to optimize their resource, or, get cost savings.
Something I really like that I'm resonating underneath is that feeling of coaching that right there in the interview, the candidate is demonstrating.
Yep. Let me ask, and again, I always like talking about, I bring this up a lot in my teams here at Ranger, but a lot of these interviewing things, a lot of communication, a lot of it is like dating. I hate that, just putting it out there, right? So what are you inferring? Like, what are you trying to ask? Because you can't just come out and directly ask the question. So how do you you try, exactly. But how do you ask the question you're looking for without asking it? And it's a complicated thing, but that's what I've always, in the coaching I've done in terms of candidates when they interview, is trying to get this mindset around what is the thing that you're really trying to look for. If you understand that you're going to get the role at the company that's growing, then potentially the question is, how committed is the mindset currently to that growth? Or how much politics do I have to play in pushing that mindset to that growth? And maybe there's a question that is specific to your area, software development, quality assurance, that you can ask at the end of an interview that points that out to give you more of an awareness, or even during the interview, right? Like looking at quality assurance, for example. I'm pretty sure most company, maybe not say most, but unit testing for developers is important, right? Of course. But if you understand that there's a test-driven development framework in play that does automation, then there's a maturity level there, right? So if you could get some of this information, you can pose your question a little different to see what the mindset is of obtaining that goal. Or to the good question of, and even though it's a canned one a little bit, but at the end of the interview, where do you guys feel you are in your agile journey today? I'd be interested in hearing an interviewer's thoughts on that, right? Because depending on who you talk to, they're going to give you different responses. I know it doesn't answer the exact question because it is a game a little bit, but I hope that the thought process or the perspective, I hope that shares some value.
Yeah, interviewing is the whole process is tough. I mean, it is kind of like this like gentle dance, sometimes the role that I'm in now, it was a 6 interview process to get to the job, and didn't even end up getting the job at first. They gave it to somebody else and then called me back and said, hey, we made a mistake.
Wow.
But man, 6 interviews, I was like, oh my God, you're moving things around, and they want it. They got a million questions, and each of their interview styles are different, and especially if you're in a more technical type role, depending on what you're doing, it can be tiring. Almost interviewing almost becomes like another job in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Josh, how would you expect for you to say, sorry, it's too late now, pay me double?
No, well, it's funny. I mean, it's what ended up happening was that for the job that I had, I interviewed, right, didn't get the job, and I didn't actually apply for the job initially. They found me on LinkedIn, and I said, oh, okay, you know what? This gave me some confidence to say, maybe I should go apply for another job that's similar. So I did, and I got that job. And on the day that I got that job, but I didn't actually sign yet, they called me back with a higher offer. So they got them in a bidding war between the two. So it's like, it's amazing, that's like really lucky. I got very lucky. It doesn't always work out like that, but I just feel like you try enough, you keep on shooting your shot, you're going to get there. But it is a delicate dance in the interview process, and reading each other often through Zoom, which all my interviews were done through Zoom, is hard. Sometimes you're not able to feel that same personal connection that you would in person and get that same feeling. But yeah, no, it's tough. It's interesting hearing all these perspectives like on interviewing, from tonight. So thanks for doing this for sure.
Hey, Josh, I don't mean to pick you out. You can tell me no, but it sounds
Go
like
for it.
It sounds like you interviewed just recently. It sounds like this is still hot.
This was 10 months ago.
Okay.
So yeah.
So random question for you, because maybe it gives some value. The interview process of 6 interviews, going through all that stuff, different perspectives and everything else.
Yep.
I could assume that 6 interview means that there's a lot of structure there.
Yes.
Going in, was there structure? 10 minutes later, did the interviews relate to what you ended up finding out?
They did. Yeah. Absolutely. About the company culture, it gave me an insight to, how they work and the way they think of work, and just, their vision too, I think. And that's something that's big for, I think, employees, to know the company's vision and mission and kind of align with their values, right? And I was with it. I felt connected with it. I felt strong about it, which is what made me ultimately, at the end of the day, go back to wanting to work for them and not the other company, even though the other company also presented me an offer after I had been rejected by these same people. But I felt better about how they had approached me, even through all the interviews. As tedious as it was, every person I interviewed with was a great experience. So it told me a lot about the company.
Yeah, you know what? I think that very inspirational, because I'm going through an interview. I just went through an interview process, four interviews.
Yeah.
Just last week and this week, and it's really about, when you're on the interview, if you're making a connection with the other person, and with, like, it was brought up, like with an icebreaker or something, and you just get a feeling. I get a feeling that I really nailed it, and I got I got my point across. And then there are situations where it doesn't happen. You just don't get the feeling, and it's a matter of there's not necessarily a click there, and everything is through Zoom or Teams or WebEx, and stuff, there is no personal, there really is no personal connection. So it's you really try your darndest to portray, you know, be as human as you can on the other side of the video there.
I could also
I think
Go
go ahead.
I could also speak to that a little bit because I just had an interview 2 weeks ago, finally. But this time it was interview with the person who would this candidate actually report to. So I was really, you know, I was able to tell that person, thank you so much for interviewing me. And then, like, let's say you decided I'm not a good fit, I'll respect that, you know, like, but I, you know, as long as I don't have to talk to someone who is like reading questions, you know,
Right.
and then, you know, have to, you know, present my answers to someone, you know, I was like, thank you so much. So I spoke to her, and then next day I spoke to her boss, and it was amazing interview. You know, I didn't get the job because a client was in a really high government position. It was like a government role, and the client wanted someone with more experience. But I was able to get to that place where I was talking to client. The client was actually interviewing me as well. So I would assume that they wouldn't put anyone in front of the client. So I was hoping that I was like a good candidate, right? So and this meetup tonight is actually extremely important to me because same company called me back today, and I got another interview tomorrow for another role.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Congrats. That's
Thank you so
huge.
much. Yeah, yeah.
That's great.
You
So
gotta be persistent and don't give up.
yeah, I told them what I want to do, and you know, I was able. They were really transparent with me from the beginning, to the point that I was, when they were explaining me the job, I was able to tell them, like, do you guys know that what you guys are doing is not actual Scrum? And they were like, yeah, like we know that, but like, you know, we're working with government, we need to be flexible, you know, and all of these questions and answers and just the communication between two of us was just, you know, amazing. And it was so transparent. And even though I didn't get the job, I appreciated that I had amazing interviews. And, you know, both that person, my first interviewer, and her boss told me, hey, like, in case if this doesn't work out, you know, with this client, we will keep you in mind. So this won't be the last time we spoke, and it wasn't. So thank you for tonight. I really appreciate this topic.
Well, Ninad, congratulations on that. And I'll say this to you, and I'll say this to anyone here. As I gave out my contact information, I'm always happy to help with understanding how to interview in a more direct way to each one of you in these interviews at any time. No problem. So you can always reach out to me and ask those more direct questions. And I think something you said which was interesting too, is that as you go through the interview process, you start to collect data of what the company finds of important. And the fact that you were put in front of the client means that they collected enough data that they think that you can respond properly, which is 100% accurate. And if you guys take notes of those points and bring them up in sequences in subsequent interviews, that message will carry through and is a great best practice to do.
Well, speaking of clarification, she was talking to me a lot in the first interview, and I was trying to, you know, get all the notes I could. So I sent her email after that. I was like, hey, let me check if I got this right. You know, this is, and she was like, oh, actually, it's this way. So she just, you know, like, you know, in the end, I understood, which was the most important thing, you know, when I didn't in the beginning.
That's great. That's great. Thank you for the share. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
So I had a question because you guys, I don't know who mentioned this, but the whole idea of starting a video interview and being able to connect. And what are some things that you guys do to kind of, somebody said break the ice, somebody said, but what does that look like? And again, it depends on the situation, we know, but what have you used? Has anybody given us any hints of what you try to use to kind of break the ice, relax the mood, or you know, feel comfortable with that person next?
So I got a good story.
Go ahead.
So I was interviewing with Ford for an agile coach position. And, you know, just as I started the interview, I told them that I owned like 3 Fords and how amazing the product was and all this, you know, these cars are great. I love them. I'm a car guy.
And you own no.
That was it, man. That was so yeah, it's just like, you know, it's that you know, hearing that, you know, was like, I guess, music to the ears, and it was just a good icebreaker. And you know, like before, like one of the things I say, like before we even start interviewing, I just got to say one thing, that type of thing, you know, and that's how I broke the ice with that. They actually offered me the position, but I took a different job at Next Energy.
Anybody else?
To what Joe said in the beginning, you look someone up on LinkedIn. So these interviewers I was talking to, they worked for a company for like 7-10 years, and I was like, I mean, that's amazing, guys. Like, you know, can you tell me a little bit more about the company? So it's just, you know, just again, you know, conversation.
I'd like to add something else into here, because this has been an experience of mine working with a few different companies, and could be an icebreaker. There's a few companies that will tell me that if they get on a call with someone and they say, hey, do you know what we do? If they can't verbalize it, they forget it. Now, we can talk about whether or not that's right or wrong, because I have opinions on that, and I'm sure everyone does have opinions on that. But you can't, I look at it like a club, right? If you go to a club, you're either going to wait in the line or you're going to have to buy a bottle to get in. Right? So if you look at this the same way, if you understand the company and you enter into the interview and you say, you know what, it's so nice to connect with you on this interview, because one of the things I thought was really interesting about Ford is that you guys are transitioning to electric engines, and I'm curious on how the technology puts into play, and if you're using more of an agile framework of SAFe, or maybe a differentiator or Spotify model or something like this within your technical teams.
Wow.
Right? Like, boom.
Yep.
Right? Because now it's, first of all, you explain to them that you're excited. You talk to them about what's going on. And now you kind of caught them off guard too, because now they have to answer a question for you to start the communication before them asking a question.
I like that, Brian. I'm just curious also for me, and I know this is kind of difficult again, remote, is how do you see somebody's face and see the mood that the person's in? Like, I swear, sometimes I see people in a very happy mood. Sometimes I see them in a kind of down mood. And I'm like trying to, and some, you know, so it's like, I try to read as much as possible. I think we forget that. That's a big skill set that we can't lose. When you're asking questions, does the person look puzzled on how you're responding to it? Or
Body language.
Are you too busy trying to just, you know, follow your routine? How do you know when you've said enough? I sometimes use whatever is around them. Like if they have their video off or whatever, and there's something interesting, I sometimes bring that up as well, because there's a story. There might be a story behind it. Even their virtual background might be a story. It's just a way to say, look, hey, if we kind of find that common denominator, that also helps out a lot. Like Joe did with the car.
The other good point about that is they're going to remember you, because if they're interviewing 30 candidates, right, they're going to remember, oh, yeah, I remember that guy. He was the guy that was telling me about, you know, his Mustang GT and how, you know, how great the product was and how they're going to transition to EV and all that stuff. So that's, if you can get them to think about you, then that's a good way to get in.
All right, how are we doing, Brian? I wanted to actually get a quick snapshot. Is that okay? Or I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just key takeaways, right, guys? I think we covered a lot of stuff. Key takeaways: know who you're talking to, know the answer that you're giving compared to the question, communicate well, right, and critically think. Pay attention to what's coming across to you, so you can respond in the best way. But I thank you all.
I'd also like to share with something with the group, because one of the reasons, and the first reason why this person told me that she called me, that I got the interview, was design of my resume. So not the content, design. So I'm going to share in a chat with you the website where I did that. So there's a subscription for it, but it was, I mean, $50 for 3 months. It was worth it.
Wow.
The
If I can
resume.
just throw in a different comment, but back to what Michael B was talking about, you know, with everything on Zoom and whatnot, it is the reality. And companies, they love you in there, but they also love the reach and being out there. And this is the reality. And you're never going to be in their office in San Francisco. You're going to always be online. And that also leads to, it's like, crap, all the competition for that one job. They do have the whole world. And it's daunting, and it's a hard feeling to keep feeling, man, you know, there's 100 people applying, and it's just a psychological thing. It's been hard to slog through for me, but it's, you know.
Yeah, the best way
I
to
would say,
best,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, yeah, one of the best things to do for that is just networking. You know, it's who you know, right?
What networking, I guess, and you're driving at online, networking online.
It's a matter of persistence, keeping at it. And I also see it as I really see it as a numbers game. And what I mean by that is that being persistent and keep at it, adjusting and improving on things, doing things differently. And at some point, you're going to get a hit. And that's the way I approach it. And that's the way I have to approach it.
So guys, we're gonna take a just quick pause just because I want to take a picture of you, but we want to answer some more questions. But can we all just turn on your cameras real quick? Just really quick.
Yeah, we're a big South Florida Agile Association in the house.